I'm rebuilding The Sims in Unreal Engine 5. And this isn't just a visual remake, but a playable game built from scratch that aims to capture the spirit of The Sims 1. Just this video's content took over 40 hours to develop. I recorded all the progress and all the problems. Why this looks slow? Maybe this way? Nope, no idea how this works. I grew up with this game, spent a ridiculous number of hours playing it as a kid, and later I even built the multiplayer mod for The Sims 4. In this first episode, to kick off the series, we're rebuilding Bob Newby's lot from the ground up, the very first lot in the life of many Simmers. Let's get into it. First, I opened the game and took some reference screenshots. Then I exported Bob Newby to use him as a scale reference while building. I've added the universal camera plugin to set up an isometric camera to match the original game's look. I spent some time dialing in the settings to match it perfectly. I quickly set up the input and was ready with the basics. Well, almost ready. After fixing the camera, I was ready to move forward to the... I started blocking out the walls of Bob Newby's little home. Once I had all the rooms, I added the sidewalk and the road, just like in the original. Once the blockout was done, I was thinking to do the unthinkable. Because honestly, my modeling skills leave something to be desired, and that's how I turned to asset packs. I chose two that seemed close to what I had in mind. The first step was adding the road. It looked a bit off though, so I hopped into the modeling tools and made sure it fell nicely on the grid. Then it was time for grass. I created a landscape and filled it with grass from the pack. Using runtime virtual textures, I removed it from the unwanted areas. And it looked great, until I pressed play. Why this looks slow? Yeah. The isometric camera was bugging the grass rendering, so I had to find another solution. There was an issue though. It wasn't available in my country, so I had to use a So I had to travel to the US just to buy the plugin. It totally 100% happened, and I forgot to take any pictures while traveling. In the end though, I just ended up using a perspective camera with a narrow field of view. With our beautiful environment ready, I could move on to the next step. To bring Bob's home to life, I continued with creating the floors with the modeling tools. For the flooring and wall paint, I used materials from Megascans. I had to hack them a bit to hide the grass creeping in. But for the kitchen tiles, I just couldn't find a perfect match. So I spent nearly an hour trying to figure out a way to extract it directly from the game. Then I was thinking, the game only stores the distorted texture anyway, so theoretically... So I simply took a screenshot, corrected the perspective, and then upscaled it with AI. I used Materialize to generate the normal and the roughness maps. It actually looks proper. For the walls, I prepared the geometry, fixed the UVs, and assigned the materials to the faces. Then I cut holes for the doors and the windows. The sun shouldn't be shining into the rooms, I guess. So I duplicated the floor to block it. Then I painted the walls. I somehow gotta do these as well. So I added the wall decoration meshes, applied textures, again from Materializer, and piece by piece, the first room started to come together. It was finally time to have some... Before moving on to other rooms, I wanted to make sure this concept could work well, so I decided to furnish the kitchen first. Also, I had to recolor the objects and manually edit some textures to match the original. And then came... the Remade challenge. Since I've never found anything similar to the kitchen table, which is pretty iconic, I had to model it myself. Maybe this way... Nope. Once it was finished, imported into the game, added materials, and it ended up pretty accurate. With that in place, I could start filling in the rest of the room. The radio, TV, phone, and the most important piece of all. The clown portrait. If I wasn't cancelled for the asset pack, I surely get it for using AI. And just like that, the first room was finished. I think it looked pretty nice, but I couldn't get a proper picture of it because of the walls. So I had to implement... I messed around with the game a bit to figure out how wall hiding could work. and in the end, I have absolutely no idea how this works. But after experimenting for a while, I landed on a close enough solution. I trace a ray from the center of every tile in the room toward the camera, and whichever walls those rays hit would get hidden. And it actually worked pretty well. I wrote the whole system in AngelScript. It's like scripting with blueprints, but without the nodes. But hiding walls wasn't enough. I also had to hide doors, windows, and even wall decorations to make the view clean. It seemed to work pretty well, but actually, in the original Sims, there's this tiny bit of wall still visible when it's hidden. So, to stay faithful to that, I created a squashed version of each wall as a hidden placeholder, just to keep that little detail in. I was really starting to like where this was going, so I decided to go all in. I added some plants, flowers, and then moved on to finish the rest of the rooms. First up, the bathroom. Then the bedroom. One by one, the house started to feel like, well, a home. And then came the garden. The signature flamingos were a must-have. Yeah, one of them may or may not have a head. I built the fountain using some urns and stones. Not exactly how they did it in the original, but hey, the water's flowing. Bob's house was really starting to take shape, but there was still one thing missing. For the roof, I wanted to match the classic hip-roof style from the original game, so I started modeling it from a cube, and after a bit of the usual hustle I go through when modeling, this looks absolutely garbage, to be honest. It was painfully clear that this is just a flat shape with a texture added on top. So I went deep into the Unreal docs to figure out how to enable tessellation with nanite. And honestly, that made a huge difference. I used some basic tubes for the hip ridges. Nothing fancy, but it worked well enough. To finish it off, I coded some logic to toggle roof visibility, just like in the original game. And just like that, our first Sims lot is complete. Next up, we're bringing Bob to life. So if you enjoyed it and want to see where this goes, hit subscribe and leave a comment what feature I should build next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.